Emily Johnson, a single mother-to-be, left coffee on her boss's desk every morning until he discovered it and wanted to meet her. Forbidden feelings surfaced, and their lives changed forever. An impossible love story that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment on where you're watching from. The alarm rang at 5:15 in the morning, cutting through the silence of the small two-room apartment in Brooklyn like a sharp blade. Emily slowly opened her eyes, one hand instinctively going to her 7-month pregnant belly that stood out under the faded sheet. The baby moved, as if it also knew it was time to start another day in the long journey that had become her life. "Good morning, little one," she whispered, caressing her belly as she slowly got up from the single bed she shared with the dreams and fears that accompanied her every night. Another day, another battle. The apartment was tiny, but she had transformed every corner into a home. The yellowed walls came to life with photos of Grandma Betty, who had raised her with love and a firm hand until she passed away 2 years ago, leaving her, truly alone in the world. On the small MDF shelf, management books mixed with the guides she read religiously every night. Emily was 26 years old, but seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime on her shoulders. Her brown hair, always tied up in a neat bun, framed a delicate face where her green eyes reflected a determination she had cultivated since she was 15, when she had to work to help her grandma sell homemade treats at the school gate. Her beauty was subtle, the kind that grows on those who observe her closely, the gentle curve of her lips, the way her eyes lit up when she smiled sincerely, the upright posture she maintained even when fatigue threatened to overcome her. "You will know a better world than this, my child," she murmured as she headed to the shower. "I swear on everything sacred." The shower was quick and functional. The warm water, a luxury she allowed herself only on work days, flowed over her body, washing away some of the accumulated fatigue. Emily looked at her belly in the bathroom's foggy mirror, still amazed by the changes her body was undergoing. Each day brought something new: swollen feet, aching back, the baby moving at specific times, as if it already had its own schedule. At 5:45, she was in the small kitchen, preparing the coffee she would take to the 30th floor of Tech Corp Innovations. The ritual had started 2 months ago, almost by chance. She had arrived earlier than usual to organize some overdue reports, and while passing by the executive floor, restricted access where normally only cleaning and security staff were allowed, she noticed that the CEO was already in his office, working intensely even though it was still early morning. He must be exhausted, she thought at the time, remembering how her grandma always said that good coffee cures any sadness and gives strength to face any problem. The coffee Emily prepared was not ordinary. She mixed 2 types of beans, one mild and the other bolder, that she bought with her tight budget at the local farmer's market, always on Saturday mornings when prices were better. She added a barely noticeable pinch of cinnamon and brewed it to the perfect point. Strong enough to wake up, smooth enough not to be bitter. "If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right," she repeated to herself, a lesson she learned watching her grandma sew school uniforms late into the night. Grandma Betty always said that the difference between an ordinary person and a special one lay in the details that no one asked for, but everyone noticed. The journey to Tech Corp was an urban adventure that began at 6 in the morning. Emily took 2 crowded buses, where she had to balance her protruding belly among grumpy executives and exhausted workers, starting another day in the bustling metropolis of New York City. During the ride, she held onto the bus's handrail with one hand and protected her thermal mug with the other, watching through the window as the city gradually woke up. New York City in the early morning had a unique energy. The still somewhat empty streets began to fill with movement, the mirrored buildings of Manhattan reflecting the first rays of sunlight piercing through the persistent fog. and the smell of bread coming from the bakeries mixed with the smoke of cars and buses. "One day, little one," she whispered to her belly while observing the imposing buildings, "one day you will work in a place like this, but by merit, by competence, not by anyone's favor." She arrived at TechCorp at 6:30, using her employee badge to access the still, semi-empty building. The night security guard, Mr. Thompson, a kind older gentleman in his 60s who had worked there for over a decade, always greeted her with a genuine smile. "Good morning, young lady. How's the little one doing?" he asked every morning, discreetly pointing to her belly. "Growing strong, Mr. Thompson. And how was your night?" "Quiet, thank God. But take care of that baby, okay? Children are a blessing from God, but they are a lot of work," he replied with the paternal tone that always reminded her of the affection she missed in her life. The service elevator was her strategic choice. Less crowded than the main ones, it allowed her to go up to the 30th floor without being questioned about her presence in a restricted area. During the silent ascent, Emily checked if the coffee was at the ideal temperature, if the white porcelain mug, an heirloom from her grandma, was clean, and if the small paper napkin was neatly folded. The 30th floor was a completely different world from the 15th, where her desk in the finance department was located. Here, everything exuded understated luxury and power. Plush carpets muffled any sound. Artwork she couldn't identify, but that clearly cost a fortune, adorned the walls, and an almost reverent silence contrasted with the constant buzz of her footsteps. The CEO's office, Mr. Anderson, was located at the end of the main corridor. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a breathtaking panoramic view of New York City, especially at this hour when the mist still danced between the buildings like urban ghosts. Emily always paused for a few seconds to admire the view, imagining what it would be like to have that perspective of the city every day. The dark mahogany desk dominated the space, always impeccably organized, with only a few documents perfectly aligned, a Mont Blanc pen that cost more than her monthly salary, and the small succulent she had placed there 3 months ago when she noticed the room needed a touch of life. "It must be lonely working here," she had thought at the time, observing the elegant coldness of the office that felt more like a museum than a workplace. Emily always placed her cup in the same spot, on the right side of the desk, on a small saucer that matched the porcelain, positioned so that he would see it immediately upon sitting down. The steaming coffee wafted gently, releasing the aroma she hoped would bring a moment of pleasure amidst the rush of executive life. May he have a better day than yesterday, she silently wished, taking one last look at the magnificent view before heading to the door. The walk back to the elevator was always hurried. Emily knew Mr. Anderson would arrive in a few minutes, always punctually at 7 in the morning, and she couldn't risk being discovered. Not that she was doing anything wrong, but explaining her presence there would be complicated and potentially embarrassing. During those quiet mornings, as she walked through the empty halls, Emily carried with her the subtle scent of jasmine she wore, the same one her mother used, according to Grandma Betty. It was her only extravagance, a small bottle that lasted for months and that she applied sparingly, as if each drop were precious. The delicate fragrance accompanied her through the corridors, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and creating a signature scent that she didn't know, but that was already noticed and appreciated. Back on her floor, Emily began another day as an administrative assistant in the finance department. Her work was meticulous, organizing documents, checking spreadsheets, answering phones, and assisting analysts with tasks that required precision and patience. It was a job she had earned through much night study, attending technical courses while caring for her grandmother during the day. "Education is the only inheritance no one can take away from you," Grandma Betty always repeated, sewing uniforms on the old machine that occupied half the room. Study, girl, study as if your life depended on it, because it truly does. The finance department was a dynamic environment with 10 employees, rotating between analyses, reports, and meetings. Emily had earned the respect of her colleagues through competence and dedication, but she knew that her pregnancy generated comments and concerns about her future at the company. "Emily, are you okay?" often asked Mariana, a 35-year-old senior analyst who had become a sort of older sister to her. "I'm fine, Mari. The baby is growing well and I'm taking care of myself," she always replied, omitting the sleepless nights studying for the business degree she was pursuing in the evenings. The mornings passed quickly between spreadsheets and reports, but Emily always found a few minutes to wonder if he liked the coffee, if he noticed the care with which she prepared it, if those few minutes of morning pleasure made a difference in his seemingly solitary routine. "Why do you do this?" she sometimes asked herself, watching her belly grow day by day. "Why do you care so much about someone who doesn't even know you exist?" The answer always came in the form of a feeling hard to explain. The need to spread a little kindness in a world that for her had been mostly harsh and lonely. Perhaps it was Grandma's influence, who always taught that small acts of kindness come back multiplied to those who practice them. Or perhaps it was simply her nature, a natural generosity that led her to care for others before herself, even when she desperately needed care. As she typed numbers into endless spreadsheets, Emily dreamed of the future she would build for her child. A future where he would have opportunities she had only known through books, where he could choose his profession out of passion, not necessity, where he would grow up knowing he was loved and wanted, even if his biological father had chosen not to be part of this journey. The day ended, but Emily's journey continued. At 6 in the evening, she took the 2 buses that would take her back to Brooklyn, where the college textbooks awaited her, the solitary dinner and the preparation of the coffee she would take the next morning for the man who didn't know of her existence, but who, unknowingly, had become an important part of her routine and silent dreams. Mr. Anderson arrived at TechCorp every day at 7 in the morning sharp, driving his silver Porsche Panamera through the still-empty corridors of Faria Lima Avenue. At 35, he bore the weight of a surname that opened doors while simultaneously creating suffocating expectations. His father, Eduardo Anderson, had built the company from scratch in the 80s and 90s, transforming a small technology consulting firm into one of the largest multinationals in the country. "You can't just inherit success, Ricardo," were the words that echoed in his mind every morning, spoken by his father on his deathbed 3 years ago. "You need to prove that you deserve every square foot." Mr. Anderson was aware of the weight of his responsibilities. "From this building, every employee who trusts you, every dollar our company moves." He stood 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders shaped by morning swimming sessions at the Chelsea Club, and dark brown hair always perfectly styled. His blue eyes, a legacy from his Italian mother, were often described as cold by his employees, but in reality they reflected more caution than chill. A protective shield developed over years of dealing with people who approached him for the wrong reasons. He dressed with the precision of someone who knew every detail would be scrutinized. Tailored Italian suits, silk ties that perfectly matched discreet cufflinks, and impeccably polished English shoes. His morning routine included 40 minutes of swimming, a cold shower, a light breakfast, and reading 3 financial newspapers before leaving home. The penthouse in the Upper East Side, where he lived alone, was a reflection of his personality. Modern, functional, with carefully selected contemporary art pieces and a panoramic view of the city that he observed every night with a glass of 18-year-old Scotch whiskey. It was a beautiful space, but it breathed solitude, much like the life he had built by protecting himself from superficial and self-serving relationships. On that Thursday morning, Mr. Anderson parked in the building's underground garage and went straight to the 30th floor, greeting only with a polite nod the night security guard who was already preparing to leave. The executive elevator was his private territory, where he could mentally organize his agenda for the day without needing to smile or engage in pleasantries. Upon opening the door to his office, he was greeted by the aroma that had become the best part of his mornings for the past 2 months. Freshly brewed coffee, with a subtle hint of cinnamon that reminded him of childhood at his grandfather's farm, when mornings were simple and did not carry the weight of decisions affecting thousands of jobs. "Again," he murmured to himself, observing the white porcelain cup perfectly positioned next to his planner. The coffee was at the ideal temperature, neither too hot nor lukewarm, just as he liked it, a detail that intrigued him because he had never mentioned this preference to anyone. Mr. Anderson sat in his German leather armchair and took the first sip, closing his eyes for a moment to savor not just the drink, but the mystery behind it. Who knew his schedule so precisely? Who took the trouble to come up here every morning to leave that silent gift? And why? "Ms. Helen," he called on the intercom to his personal assistant, who would arrive promptly at 8, but Helen was not there yet. It was exactly 7:03, and the mystery continued. Mr. Anderson observed the cup with renewed attention, noticing details he had previously overlooked. The porcelain was delicate but not expensive, likely a family heirloom. The saucer matched perfectly, suggesting it was part of a set. The paper napkin was carefully folded, a domestic touch that contrasted with the corporate coldness of the environment. During the second cup, because the coffee was too good to waste, Mr. Anderson made a decision that surprised even himself. He would find out who was behind those gestures, not out of distrust or paranoia, but from a genuine curiosity he hadn't felt in years. In a world where every gesture had ulterior motives and every kindness hid interests, that morning coffee seemed genuinely selfless. Ms. Helen Carter arrived at 8 sharp, as always. At 52, she was more than a personal assistant. She was the guardian of the Anderson family's reputation, and one of the few people who knew all the company's secrets. She had started as Mr. Anderson's father's secretary 28 years ago and had witnessed all the transformations, crises, and achievements of TechCorp innovations. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she greeted with the formality they maintained even after so many years of daily interaction. Helen had her grey hair always neatly tied in an elegant bun, wore discreet women's suits, and had an expression that alternated between professional efficiency and maternal concern. "Helen, I need you to help me with something," Mr. Anderson said, pointing to the empty cup. "Someone has been leaving coffee on my desk every morning for 2 months. I want to know who it is." Helen raised an eyebrow, a gesture Mr. Anderson knew well that always preceded some insightful or concerning comment. "Coffee? It wasn't any of our suppliers, I can guarantee that. And the cleaning crew works until 5 in the morning. You arrive at 7? "Exactly. Someone is coming here between 5:30 and 7 in the morning, leaving hot coffee and disappearing without a trace." Helen crossed her arms, adopting the posture she always took when she sensed danger approaching the family she had protected for decades. "Mr. Anderson, this worries me. It could be an employee trying to get your attention, some kind of strategy to get close to you. Or it could simply be someone being kind," Mr. Anderson countered, surprising himself with his own defense of a person he didn't even know. "Selfless kindness is an extinct species in the corporate world, especially when it involves single CEOs of billion-dollar companies," Helen replied with the brutal honesty he had always respected in her. "I want you to check the security cameras. And from the last 3 weeks, time frame between 5:30 and 7 in the morning, all access to the 30th floor." Helen hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the situation was taking. "Mr. Anderson, remember what happened with your father? The scandal with that employee almost destroyed the company. The press, the board of directors, your mother. It was hell that took years to overcome." Mr. Anderson stood up from his chair, walking to the panoramic window that offered a view of the city waking up. Down below, New York City buzzed with its 12 million inhabitants, chasing dreams, survival, and opportunities. Somewhere in that crowd was the person responsible for those moments of morning kindness that had become essential to him. Not, "I'm planning to repeat my father's mistakes, Helen. I just want to know who she is." Simple curiosity. "Nothing involving you is simple, Mr. Anderson. You know that." 2 hours later, Ms. Carter returned to the office with an expression that mixed surprise and confirmed concern. She held in her hands some printed images from the security cameras and a report that clearly troubled her. "I found her," she announced, placing the photos on the table. Emily Johnson, 26 years old, administrative assistant in the finance department, approximately 7 months pregnant. Mr. Anderson studied the images with growing attention. The photos showed a young woman of average height, dark hair tied in a bun, moving carefully through the hallways due to her advanced pregnancy. Even in the grainy images from the security system, one could perceive the delicacy of her movements and the care with which she held the cup. "She works on the 30th floor, Ms. Carter continued. "Hired 2 years ago, performance reviews always excellent. Single, no disciplinary history. A night student of business administration at St. Jude's University." "Why would she do this?" Mr. Anderson asked, more to himself than to Ms. Carter. "That's exactly the question that worries me," the assistant replied. "A pregnant employee, single, from humble beginnings, working in an administrative role. Mr. Anderson, please be cautious. It could be an attempt to gain benefits, a promotion, or it could just be someone being kind." Mr. Anderson interrupted, but this time his voice carried less conviction. Throughout the rest of the morning, Mr. Anderson found himself distracted, repeatedly returning to the photos of Emily. There was something in her posture, in the way she carefully held the cup, that piqued his curiosity. It wasn't the predatory curiosity he was familiar with, powerful men interested in easy conquests. It was something different, closer to the admiration he felt for people who did good without expecting recognition. "You're thinking about her," Ms. Carter observed during the noon meeting, noticing how Mr. Anderson had lost his train of thought 3 times during the quarterly results presentation. "I'm thinking about why someone would do something like that without wanting anything in return," Mr. Anderson corrected. "It's unusual. It's suspicious," Ms. Carter replied, "especially considering her situation. Unplanned pregnancy, no father in sight, administrative assistant salary. She might be desperate. Or she might be genuinely kind to someone she imagines is overwhelmed with work." Ms. Carter sighed, recognizing the signs she knew well after decades working with the Anderson family. Mr. Anderson was intrigued, and when an Anderson became intrigued by a woman, the consequences were rarely simple. "What do you intend to do?" she asked, already fearing the answer. Mr. Anderson looked back at the photos, especially one where Emily appeared in profile, her prominent belly contrasting with the delicacy of her gestures. "I want to meet her, in person." "Mr. Anderson?" "Not in the way you're thinking, Ms. Carter. I just want to thank her for the coffees and understand her motivations. That's all." Ms. Carter watched him with the skeptical gaze of someone who had seen that story repeat itself before, but this time with a tragic ending. Mr. Anderson's father had become involved with an employee 20 years younger, a scandal that nearly cost the company and the family, ending in blackmail, lawsuits, and a suicide attempt that left scars on everyone involved. "Be careful," was all she could say, knowing that when Mr. Anderson made a decision, he rarely turned back. During the afternoon, Mr. Anderson found himself watching the 30th floor through the company's internal cameras, a breach of privacy he justified as a need to know his employees better. He saw Emily working at her desk, focused on spreadsheets, occasionally caressing her belly almost unconsciously. There was a serenity about her that contrasted with the hustle and bustle of the finance department. Even pregnant and clearly nearing the end of her term, she maintained her professional demeanor, treated colleagues with kindness, and demonstrated competence in her tasks. "Interesting," Mr. Anderson murmured, turning off the monitor. The next morning, Mr. Anderson arrived 15 minutes early to the office, determined to catch Emily in her morning routine. He parked the car and went straight up to the 30th floor, but found only the coffee already served and the familiar aroma of cinnamon lingering in the air. "She's efficient," he thought, involuntarily admiring the punctuality and discretion of the operation. It was then that he decided to alter his strategy. The following Monday, Mr. Anderson would arrive even earlier, at 6:45. If Emily truly left the coffee between 5:30 and 7 in the morning, he would finally meet her in person. As he savored the coffee that morning, Mr. Anderson found himself anxious for Monday in a way he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just professional curiosity, it was a genuine interest in getting to know the person behind the gestures that had become the best part of his days, even if he hesitated to admit that to Ms. Carter, or to himself. Monday, 6:45 in the morning. Mr. Anderson had been in his office for 15 minutes, pretending to review documents while discreetly watching the glass door. He had arrived earlier than ever, determined to finally meet in person the woman responsible for the morning coffees that had become an essential part of his routine. The 30th floor was immersed in an almost religious silence, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning and the murmur of the city waking up 30 floors below. The morning mist of New York City still embraced the buildings along Fifth Avenue, creating an almost cinematic atmosphere through the panoramic windows. Mr. Anderson adjusted the navy blue tie he had carefully chosen, one of the few that didn't scream, "Intimidating CEO," and checked his watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. He felt ridiculously nervous, like a teenager waiting for a first date, which was absurd considering it was just a conversation with an employee about morning coffee. At 6:51, the almost imperceptible sound of the service elevator arriving at the 30th floor made his heart race embarrassingly. Mr. Anderson stood up from his chair, walked closer to the door, and Emily waited, trying to appear natural while pretending to organize some papers on the desk. She emerged from the elevator, carrying her thermal cup with the usual care. But her steps were slightly slower than usual. The 7.5-month pregnancy was clearly weighing on her small frame, but she maintained the upright and determined posture that Mr. Anderson had observed on the security cameras. That morning, she wore a simple yet well-tailored navy blue maternity dress that accentuated her green eyes and delicately contrasted with her brown hair, neatly tied up in her signature bun. The subtle scent of jasmine preceded her through the hallways, mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. When Emily approached the office door and saw Mr. Anderson standing there watching her, her world stopped. For a full 5 seconds. The cup trembled slightly in her hands, but she managed to keep her composure, even as she felt the heat rise from her neck to her cheeks. "Good morning," Mr. Anderson said in a softer voice than she had imagined possible coming from the CEO, known for his corporate coldness. "You must be Emily." "Yes, sir." "Emily Johnson," she replied, her voice coming out lower than she intended. "I can explain." "You don't need to explain anything you don't want to," Mr. Anderson interrupted, noticing her nervousness and trying to ease the situation. "Actually, I should be the one explaining why I'm here early, waiting for you." Emily blinked a few times, clearly confused. That was not the reaction she had expected. She had mentally prepared herself to be reprimanded for being in a restricted area, possibly fired for inappropriate behavior, or at best, formally warned. "You were waiting for me?" she asked, still processing the information. "Yes, I was. For the past 2 months, you've been leaving coffee on my desk every morning. Excellent coffee, I might add. I wanted to meet you in person to thank you." Mr. Anderson gestured for her to enter the office, but Emily hesitated at the threshold, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Please come in. It won't be a problem," he insisted, noticing her hesitation. "I would love to talk to you for a few minutes." Emily slowly stepped inside, her eyes taking in every detail of the space she only knew as empty and silent. With Mr. Anderson there, the office felt smaller, more imposing. He had a presence that filled the space, not intimidating as she had expected, but magnetic in a way that made her even more nervous. "You can leave the coffee on the table, as always," Mr. Anderson said, pointing to the spot where she usually placed the cup. "And please, have a seat. You must be tired." Emily placed the cup in its usual spot with slightly trembling hands and sat on the edge of the visitor chair, her hands intertwined over her prominent belly in the blue dress. "Mr. Anderson, I can explain why I come here. It's nothing inappropriate, I swear. It's just that—" "Emily," Mr. Anderson said gently, sitting in his chair but leaning forward to reduce the distance between them. "First, you can call me Mr. Anderson when we're alone. Second, you're not in trouble. In fact, it's the opposite." She looked at him in genuine surprise, noticing details she hadn't expected. His blue eyes were warmer in person than in corporate photos. He had chosen a less formal tie than usual, and there was a kindness in his posture that completely contrasted with the reputation for coldness that preceded him. "The opposite," she repeated. "Your coffees have been the best part of my mornings for the past 2 months. They're perfect. Ideal temperature, balanced flavor, that hint of cinnamon that reminds me of my childhood at my grandfather's. Ifam, I wanted to know why you do this." Emily lowered her gaze to her intertwined hands, organizing her thoughts before responding. She had mentally rehearsed that conversation dozens of times, imagining different scenarios, but never one where he expressed genuine gratitude. "My grandmother always said that good coffee cures any sadness and gives strength to face any problem," she began, her voice gaining firmness as she spoke. "I arrive early to organize some reports and always see your light on when I pass by. I thought that, well, you must work a lot, you must be tired, and maybe a coffee made with care would do you good." "Made with care," Mr. Anderson repeated, savoring the words. "How long has it been since anyone has done anything with care for me?" The comment came out more personal than he intended, revealing a vulnerability he rarely admitted to himself, let alone to a stranger. Emily lifted her gaze, sensing the sincerity behind his words. "Everyone needs care, no matter how successful they seem," she said softly. "My grandmother used to say that too." "Your grandmother seems to have been a wise woman," Mr. Anderson commented. "Is she still—" "She passed away 2 years ago," Emily interrupted, a shadow passing over her green eyes. "Cancer. She was all I had left of family." "I'm sorry," Mr. Anderson said with genuine sincerity. "That must have been very difficult." "It was, but she taught me to be strong, to work hard, and to always treat people with kindness, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it." They fell into silence for a few moments, a comfortable silence that allowed both to process the conversation that was unfolding very differently than either had imagined. "And the baby?" Mr. Anderson asked, discreetly gesturing to her belly. "When is he due?" Emily instinctively caressed her belly, a soft smile appearing on her face for the first time since she entered the office. In about 2 months, more or less. It's a boy. Are you excited? I am, she replied, but Mr. Anderson caught a nuance of worry in her voice. Scared too, to be honest. I'll be raising him alone. The father. Decided he wasn't ready for fatherhood, Emily said with a firmness that made it clear the subject was closed. But it's okay. We'll be fine. Mr. Anderson admired the determination in her voice, but he also noticed the vulnerability carefully hidden behind her bravado. There was something in the way. She said, "We will be okay," which sounded more like a prayer than a certainty. "I'm sure we will," he replied. "You seem like a very strong person." "I had to learn to be," Emily responded. "I didn't have much choice." The clock on the table read 7:10 in the morning, and both realized that other employees would start arriving soon. The intimate bubble of their conversation was about to be broken by corporate reality. "I should go," Emily said, starting to rise from her chair. "I don't want you to be late because of me." "Emily, before you go," Mr. Anderson said, also standing up, "can I ask you a personal question?" She nodded, though clearly apprehensive. "Why specifically me? I mean, there are other executives in the building who work late and arrive early." Emily blushed slightly but maintained eye contact with him. "I can't explain it well. Maybe because your light is always on when all the other offices are dark, or because—" she hesitated, struggling to find the right words, "because you seem lonely, like me." The brutal honesty of her answer hit Mr. Anderson like a punch in the stomach, not because it was false, but because it was absolutely true. He was lonely, deeply, fundamentally lonely, despite his success, money, and social standing. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your honesty and for the coffees." Emily nodded and headed for the door, but paused at the threshold, turning to face him one last time. "Mr. Anderson, can I keep bringing the coffee? I know now that we've met it might seem strange, but please do," he replied quickly, almost desperately. "If it's not too much work for you, especially with your advanced pregnancy, it's no trouble at all. It's a pleasure." After Emily left, Mr. Anderson stood in the middle of the office for long minutes, processing the conversation that had completely changed his perception of morning coffees and the woman responsible for them. She wasn't an employee trying to take advantage of the situation. She wasn't someone seeking benefits or promotions. She was simply a genuinely kind person who had recognized in him something he hadn't even admitted to himself: the deep loneliness of someone who had everything except true human connections. When Miss Helen arrived at 8, she found Mr. Anderson standing by the window, holding the empty cup with unusual care. "So?" she asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on his face. "So nothing," Mr. Anderson replied. "She is exactly what she seems, a good person, doing something kind without expecting anything in return." Miss Helen raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And now?" "Now I'm going to have the best coffee in New York City every morning and try to be worthy of her kindness. Mr. Anderson, Helen, not a word. This time it's different. She's different." And for the first time in years, Mr. Anderson arrived at work eager for the next morning, not for meetings or business decisions, but for the possibility of a few minutes of genuine conversation with the only person who seemed to see him as a human being before seeing him as a CEO. The next morning, Emily arrived on the 30th floor with her heart racing more than usual. The conversation with Mr. Anderson had completely turned her expectations about the man she had observed from afar for months. He wasn't the cold, distant executive his reputation suggested. There was kindness in his blue eyes, a loneliness she recognized because she carried it too, and a surprising simplicity in someone of his position. When she entered the office, she found Mr. Anderson already there, working on his laptop. He looked up when he saw her and smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face completely, making him look younger and more approachable. "Good morning, Emily," he said, closing the laptop. "How are you feeling today?" "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she replied, still getting used to the informality he had requested. "I'm fine, thank you. And you?" "Better now that you've brought my coffee," he joked, making her blush slightly. Emily placed the cup in its usual spot, but this time lingered for a few seconds longer, watching him take the first sip. The satisfaction on his face made her smile involuntarily. "Perfect as always," Mr. Anderson commented. "Seriously, where did you learn to make coffee like this?" "From my grandmother," Emily replied, unconsciously stroking her belly. "She used to say that coffee isn't just a drink, it's a ritual of affection. It has to be made with care, with time, thinking about the person who will drink it. And do you think of me when you make it?" Mr. Anderson asked, the question coming out more intimate than he intended. Emily looked down, blushing again. "I think about whether you're tired, if you had a rough night, if the day will be very heavy, things like that." The answer touched Mr. Anderson in a way he hadn't expected. For years, no one had genuinely cared about his well-being, aside from Helen in her professional role. The idea that someone started their day thinking about his comfort was both comforting and unsettling. "Thank you," he said simply, "for caring." After Emily left, Mr. Anderson found himself staring at the empty cup with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something more complex, a mix of admiration, curiosity, and something he hesitated to name. Impulsively, he took a piece of company letterhead and wrote, "Thank you for the coffee and for yesterday's conversation. I hope you have a day as kind as you are. R." He left the note next to the empty cup, where she would surely see it the next morning. On Wednesday, Emily found the note and stared at it for long seconds, rereading the carefully written words. No one had ever called her kind before. Hard-working, responsible, dedicated, but never kind. The word warmed her in an unexpected way. When Mr. Anderson arrived, she had left her own response next to the cup. "Thank you for the kind words. May your day be as good as this coffee I make thinking of you. Emily." Mr. Anderson read the note 3 times, focusing especially on the part where she admitted to making the coffee thinking of him. It was a simple confession, but it carried an intimacy that Emily felt uneasy all morning. "What's going on here?" she asked. Miss Helen, when she found him rereading the note for the 4th time during the board meeting. "Nothing much," Mr. Anderson replied, quickly tucking the paper away. "Just some administrative correspondence." Emily looked at him skeptically, but didn't press further. She knew Mr. Anderson well enough to understand that direct pressure would only make him retreat further. On Thursday, the exchange of notes continued. "Emily, you mentioned you study at night. What course? I wonder how you manage the energy to study after a full day of work, and with the pregnancy. You are impressive." "Ah," Emily's response came. "On Friday, business administration at St. Jude's. It's an old dream that I decided to pursue before the baby is born. The energy comes from the hope of giving him a better future. Sometimes it's tiring, but my grandmother used to say, if you want to rise in life, you have to climb stairs, not look for an elevator. Emily." Mr. Anderson smiled as he read the response, admiring the determination and simple wisdom behind her grandmother's words. He decided it was time to share something personal as well. "Your grandmother was wise. My father always said something similar. Privilege without merit is a curse. I'm trying to be worthy of what I inherited, but some days are harder than others. Your coffee helps me start those tough days well." Ah. The written conversation was deepening in a way that surprised them both. It was easier to be honest on paper than in person, especially with the hierarchical differences between them. Over the weekend, Emily found herself thinking about Mr. Anderson's words about trying to be worthy of what he had inherited. There was vulnerability in that confession that completely humanized him. He was not just the successful CEO. He was a man trying to honor his father's legacy, dealing with pressures she could hardly imagine. On Monday, she left a longer note. "Mr. Anderson, you are worthy, not for what you inherited, but for the man you chose to be. Someone who stops to thank an employee for a simple coffee, who genuinely cares about people he barely knows, who treats everyone with respect regardless of their position. That is not inherited, it is earned." Emily. When Mr. Anderson read that note, he had to pause for a few minutes to process the words. No one had ever validated his efforts in that way. His mother demanded results. Ms. Helen protected her reputation. The board evaluated performance, but no one had recognized the man behind the title. His response was the most personal he had written so far. "Emily, your words mean more to me than you can imagine. It's rare to find someone who sees beyond the position and the last name. You have a generous heart and a wisdom that impresses me. Your child will have an extraordinary mother." The mention of the baby made Emily stop breathing for a moment. She had noticed how Mr. Anderson always asked about her pregnancy with genuine interest, how he discreetly observed when she caressed her belly, how he offered her a seat when he saw her standing for too long. On Tuesday, something changed in the tone of the notes. Emily wrote, "Thank you for always asking about the baby. It's comforting to have someone who cares. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm doing everything wrong, that I won't be enough for him, but your words give me strength." Emily. The vulnerability in the note touched Mr. Anderson deeply. He could see the young mother behind the competent professional, the universal fears of motherhood amplified by the loneliness of having to face everything alone. "Emily, from what little I know of you, I am absolutely sure you will be a wonderful mother. The determination you show, the kindness with which you treat people, the strength to overcome difficulties, those are the qualities that truly matter. Your child is lucky to have you." Ms. Helen began to notice subtle changes in Mr. Anderson's behavior. He was arriving at the office earlier, spending less time in morning meetings, and had a more relaxed expression during the early hours of the day. When she discovered the notes during one of the weekly desk organizations, her concern intensified. "Mr. Anderson, I need to talk to you," she said on Wednesday, entering the office just after Emily left. "Of course, Helen. What's wrong?" "These notes you two are exchanging, this is going too far." Mr. Anderson stiffened slightly. "They are just cordial conversations between colleagues." "Mr. Anderson, don't treat me like an idiot. I read some of the notes. This isn't professional cordiality. You are developing emotional intimacy." "And what's wrong with that?" "The problem is that she is a subordinate employee, pregnant, financially and emotionally vulnerable. Any involvement, even emotional, can be seen as an abuse of power." "Helen, I'm not abusing anything. I'm being kind to someone who has been kind to me." Kindness that may be misinterpreted by her. "Mr. Anderson, you need to think about what you're doing. Your words can change her life completely, for better or worse. That's not fair to her." Helen's words planted a seed of doubt in Mr. Anderson's mind. Could it be that his attention was creating expectations in Emily? That she was interpreting kindness as something more? On Thursday, for the first time in weeks, Mr. Anderson did not leave a note. Emily noticed the absence immediately and felt uneasy all day, wondering if she had written something inappropriate, if she had crossed some invisible line. On Friday, she left a hesitant note. "I hope you are okay. If I did something wrong, I'm sorry." Emily. The note broke Mr. Anderson's heart. She was taking the blame for something she hadn't done, worried about offending someone who was just trying to protect her from his own confusing intentions. His response was immediate and clear. "Emily, you did nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing. I was just reflecting on some things. Our friendship means a lot to me, and I don't want anything to jeopardize it. I hope you understand. R. Adaptações: Camila Santos Silva, Emily Johnson, Ricardo Mendonça Alves, Mr. Anderson, Helena Cristina Rocha, Ms. Helen Carter, Festa Junina da Global Tech, Tech Corp Summer Festival, Parque Ibirapuera, Central Park, Quentão, Hot Apple Cider, Pamonha, Corn Pudding, Paçoca, Peanut Candy, Forró, Country Music, Canecas de Barro, Ceramic Mugs, Dona Lourdes, Ms. Smith, Confraternização da Empresa Company Gathering." Emily intentionally used the word friendship, an attempt to establish clear boundaries for both herself and Mr. Anderson. But, as she wrote it, she realized that her feelings had already crossed the safe borders of simple friendship, and when Emily read the word friendship, she felt a pang of disappointment that surprised her. When had she started to expect more than that? When had those morning minutes become the best part of her days? When had she begun to dress more carefully in the mornings, choosing dresses that flattered her pregnant silhouette in hopes of seeing him smile when she appeared? The exchange of notes continued, but with a slightly more cautious tone from both sides. They both tried to maintain a safe emotional distance, but the connection they had developed was too strong to be easily suppressed. Deep down, both Mr. Anderson and Emily knew they were only postponing the inevitable, the moment when they would have to confess to themselves that that friendship had become something much more complicated and dangerous. The TechCorp Summer Festival was a traditional event that took place every June on the terrace of the 30th floor, a spacious area with a panoramic view of Central Park. This year, the festival promised to be special. Ms. Helen had hired elaborate decorations with colorful bunting, rustic wooden stalls, and even a small stage for musical performances. Emily had been nervous since receiving the announcement about the festival. 8 months pregnant, she felt awkward and out of place at company social events. Moreover, there was the added complication of knowing that Mr. Anderson would be there, and she still wasn't sure how to deal with the confusing feelings that their morning conversations had awakened. "You have to go, Em," insisted Mariana during the lunch break. "It's practically mandatory for anyone wanting to get promoted, and you're on the shortlist for the department supervisor position." 8 months pregnant, Mariana. Who's going to promote me in this condition? "A company that values dedicated employees," replied Mariana, lovingly adjusting Emily's hair. "You've been working here for 2 years, never missed a day. Your evaluations are always excellent, and you're finishing your degree. Pregnancy is temporary, but your competence is permanent." On Friday afternoon, the day before the festival, Emily was at home trying to decide what to wear when she received a message on her corporate phone, something that had never happened before. "Emily, I hope to see you at the festival tomorrow. I know it may be uncomfortable with your advanced pregnancy, but your presence would be greatly appreciated. If you need anything during the event, don't hesitate to reach out. Mr. Anderson." The message left her even more confused about his intentions. On one hand, it was thoughtful and caring. On the other, why would a CEO send a personal message to an administrative assistant about a corporate party? Saturday arrived with a typical partly cloudy winter sky. Emily chose a dark blue maternity dress, the most elegant she owned, and a beige wool scarf that had belonged to her grandmother. She applied light makeup and jasmine perfume, took a deep breath, and headed to the office. The terrace had been transformed. The colorful bunting fluttered in the chilly afternoon breeze, creating a festive and welcoming atmosphere. Wooden stalls offered hot apple cider, corn pudding, peanut candy, and other typical treats. A country music trio played on the small stage, and about 200 employees were already mingling, creating a lively buzz that contrasted with the usual corporate environment. Emily arrived promptly at 7 in the evening and was immediately directed by Ms. Helen to the beverage stall, where she would help serve hot apple cider and distribute peanut candy. "You'll be responsible for this section," Ms. Helen said with professional efficiency, but Emily caught a slightly cold tone in her voice. "If you have any problems, come to me." During the first hour, Emily focused on her work, serving steaming hot apple cider in ceramic mugs and offering homemade peanut candy that the company had ordered from a traditional supplier. She was feeling comfortable and useful when she noticed a different movement near the elevator. Mr. Anderson had arrived. He was wearing casual clothes that Emily had never seen: dark jeans, a light blue dress shirt without a tie, and a navy blazer. He was unrecognizable compared to the suited executive she knew, looking younger and more approachable. His hair was slightly tousled by the wind, and he was smiling genuinely as he greeted employees. For almost an hour he circulated among the stalls, chatting with people from different departments, tasting typical foods, even daring to try a few steps of country music with 2 older employees, who insisted on teaching him. Emily watched him discreetly while she worked, admiring how he managed to be charismatic without sounding fake. "He's quite different from what I imagined," commented Joanna, a colleague from finance who was helping at the neighboring stall. "What do you mean?" Emily asked, pretending to be uninterested. "Less arrogant, more human. I always thought he was one of those snobby CEOs who barely look at lower-level employees. But look at how he's talking to Ms. Smith from cleaning, with the same respect he would show a director." Emily involuntarily smiled, proud to know that her impression of Mr. Anderson was correct. He really was different from what his reputation suggested. At 8:30 in the evening, when Emily was restocking the peanut candy table, Mr. Anderson finally approached her stall. She felt her heart race and prayed that her voice would come out normally. "Good evening, Emily," he said, stopping in front of her stall with a smile that was clearly reserved for her. "How are you feeling? Not too tired?" "Good evening, Mr. Anderson. I'm fine, thank you. Are you enjoying the festival?" "I am. I haven't participated in a company gathering like this in years. I always found some excuse to escape," he admitted, accepting a mug of hot apple cider that she offered him. "And why did you decide to come today?" Mr. Anderson looked at her over the steaming mug, his blue eyes meeting her green ones. The moment made her momentarily forget where they were. "Because I knew you would be here," he said simply, the brutal honesty of the answer leaving both slightly breathless. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Helen, who appeared next to Mr. Anderson with a controlled but clearly uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Anderson, the board is looking for you," she said, her voice carrying a subtext that both understood perfectly. "Sure," Mr. Anderson replied, but he didn't move immediately. "Emily, this hot dish is excellent. Did you make it?" "No, it was the catering company. I just serve," she replied, still processing his confession about coming to the party for her. "Modest as always," Mr. Anderson commented, and they both smiled slightly. "Save a dance for me later." The question surprised both Emily and Helen. Employees stopped chatting at nearby booths, clearly picking up on the interaction between the CEO and the pregnant assistant. "Mr. Anderson," Helen began in a warning tone. "A dance between friends," he clarified quickly, but his eyes didn't leave Emily's. "If you feel comfortable, of course." "Yes, that's fine," Emily replied, her voice coming out lower than she intended. Mr. Anderson smiled, gave a polite nod, and followed Helen toward the group of directors. Emily stood behind the booth, holding a peanut candy she had forgotten to hand over to the next customer. "Girl, are you okay?" asked Ms. Aparecida, a cleaning staff member who had known Emily since she started working at the company. "I'm fine, Miss Kaida. Just thoughtful." "Thoughtful is an understatement from what I saw," the older woman commented with a mischievous smile. "That guy is handsome, huh? And polite. But be careful, okay? Rich men are different from us, the poor. They play one way, but when it comes to commitment, it's a whole different story." Ms. Aparecida's words echoed in Emily's mind for the rest of the night. She was right. There was a world of difference between her and Mr. Anderson that went far beyond their positions at the company. He was heir to a fortune, educated in the best schools, accustomed to a lifestyle she couldn't even imagine. What could he genuinely want with a pregnant administrative assistant from Brooklyn? Around 9:30, when the activity at the booth had slowed down and the music was livelier, Mr. Anderson returned. Emily saw him approaching, politely chatting with employees who intercepted his path, but clearly heading toward her. "Is the dance still on?" he asked when he reached the booth. Emily looked around, noticing that some people were discreetly watching. Helen was on the other side of the terrace, talking with directors, but her eyes frequently returned to where Mr. Anderson and Emily were. "Mr. Anderson, maybe it's not a good idea," Emily said quietly. "People are watching and what's wrong with that?" he asked, extending his hand. "It's a company party. I'm an employee. You're another employee, and we're just dancing. What's the problem?" When Emily placed her hand in his, she felt an electricity that surprised her. His hands were soft, well-groomed, but firm and warm. He gently led her to an area near the makeshift dance floor, where others were dancing to the lively music. "I don't know how to dance very well," Emily admitted, placing one hand on his shoulder while the other remained in his. "Neither do I," Mr. Anderson replied, his hand respectfully resting on her waist, just above her 8-month belly. "Let's improvise together." They began to move slowly, swaying more than actually dancing. The physical closeness was intoxicating. Emily could smell the subtle masculine fragrance he wore, mixed with the soft aroma of his aftershave. Mr. Anderson, in turn, was enveloped by the familiar scent of jasmine that accompanied her every morning. "Thank you," he said softly, close to her ear. "For what?" "For agreeing to dance with me. For not minding that I don't know what I'm doing." Emily laughed softly, a sound he found he loved to hear. "I think neither of us knows exactly what we're doing," she replied, the phrase carrying more meaning than just about the dance. They continued to move slowly, lost in an intimate bubble that seemed to separate them from the rest of the party. Emily's baby moved, a motion that Mr. Anderson felt through the contact of their hands. "He's active today," Emily commented, smiling. "Does he like music?" Mr. Anderson asked, genuinely curious. "It seems so. He always moves when I hear something I like." "And are you enjoying this music?" Emily looked into his eyes, those blue eyes that had become so familiar during their morning conversations. "I'm enjoying much more than just the music," she admitted, the honesty escaping before she could censor it. The confession hung between them, like a bridge that, once crossed, would change everything irrevocably. Mr. Anderson stopped moving, his hands still holding hers, his eyes searching hers for any sign that he had understood correctly what she had just said. "Emily," he began, but was interrupted by Helen's approach. "Sorry to interrupt," Helen said with a forced smile, "but Mr. Anderson, you have an urgent phone call. International." The magic of the moment shattered instantly. Mr. Anderson reluctantly released Emily's hands, but his eyes remained fixed on her for a few more seconds. "Sure," he replied, but his voice carried barely concealed frustration. "Emily, thank you for the dance. It was special." After he left, Emily stood in the middle of the dance floor, trying to process what had just happened. The confession she made, the way he looked at her, the feeling of being in his arms, even for a few minutes, all seemed to have changed something. fundamental between them. "Girl, be careful with that fire," advised Ms. Aparecida, who had been watching everything from a distance. "That kind of flame burns fast and hurts a lot when it goes out." Emily nodded, but deep down she knew it was already too late for caution. She had fallen for the man she had met. Through Emily Johnson sat in her office, reflecting on the morning coffees and exchanged notes, now having to deal with the consequences of this impossible reality. Across the terrace, Miss Helen Carter watched Emily with growing concern. The way Mr. Anderson looked at the young, expectant mother was not merely professional interest or casual friendship. It was something much more dangerous, and Ms. Carter feared that this time she wouldn't be able to protect either Mr. Anderson or the company from the fallout. The following Monday, after the summer festival, arrived laden with a tension that Emily felt deep in her bones. Throughout the weekend, she had relived every moment of the dance with Mr. Anderson, every word exchanged, every glance that seemed to carry unspoken promises. Now, walking through the halls of TechCorp Innovations toward the 30th floor, she wondered how it would be to face him again. The office was empty when she arrived, as always. Emily placed her white porcelain cup in its usual spot, but this time her hands trembled slightly. Next to the cup, she left a note that she had rewritten 5 times during a sleepless night. "Thank you for the dance. It was special for me too. I hope it wasn't inconvenient. Emily." Mr. Anderson arrived 15 minutes later, finding the familiar aroma of coffee with cinnamon mingled with the subtle fragrance of jasmine that he now automatically associated with the best moments of his days. He read the note twice before sitting down, involuntarily smiling as he noticed the careful hesitation in her words. His response came in the form of a longer note than usual. "Emily, it was inconvenient to have to interrupt our conversation. I've thought a lot about Friday, about our dance, about what you said. I need to be honest. You have become very important to me, more than would be prudent considering our positions. I don't quite know how to handle this, but I know I don't want you to disappear from my life. Can we talk in person? Today, Mr. Anderson?" When Emily read the note the following morning, she needed to sit down. Her legs gave way, not only from the weight of her 8-month pregnancy, but from the emotional intensity of his words. Mr. Anderson was being direct about his feelings in a way she hadn't expected, creating a situation that went far beyond the friendship they had tried to maintain. Throughout the day in the finance department, Emily could barely concentrate on her work. Mariana noticed her distraction and asked several times if she was feeling okay, if it wouldn't be better to go home and rest. "I'm fine, Mari. Just thoughtful," she replied, mechanically organizing spreadsheets while her mind processed the implications of the conversation Mr. Anderson wanted to have. On Wednesday morning, Emily arrived at the 30th floor, determined to have the conversation they both knew was inevitable. She found Mr. Anderson already waiting for her, dressed in a more casual grey suit than usual, and wearing an expression that mixed anxiety and determination. "Good morning," she said, placing her cup on the table with hands steadier than she felt inside. "Good morning, Emily. Did you read my note?" "I did, and I thought a lot about it." Mr. Anderson stood up from his chair, gesturing for her to sit down. Emily hesitated, but eventually accepted, recognizing that the conversation would be long and her belly was getting heavier by the day. "Emily, I need to be completely honest with you," Mr. Anderson began, sitting on the edge of the table to be closer to her without being intimidating. "These months of coffee and conversations have changed something in me. You have changed something in me." "Mr. Anderson, please, let me finish," he gently interrupted. "I know our situation is complicated. I am your boss. You are pregnant, going through a delicate time in your life. I know that anything I say may sound like I'm taking advantage of the situation." Emily watched him as he spoke, noticing the sincerity in his blue eyes, the way he carefully chose each word. But I also know that what I feel for you is genuine. It's not just physical attraction. It's not pity. It's not some savior complex. It's deep admiration for your strength, for your kindness, for the way you face life with dignity despite all the hardships. And what exactly are you proposing? Emily asked, her voice coming out more controlled than she felt. Mr. Anderson ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she had noticed he did when he was nervous. Honestly, I don't know. I know I want to get to know you better, spend time with you outside of this corporate environment. I know I want to be present in your life, in your baby's life, if you allow me. As a friend, she asked, echoing the word he had used in the notes weeks ago. As more than a friend, if you want. As the man who has fallen for you, if you can see beyond the difference in our positions. The confession hung between them like a bomb that had just exploded. Emily felt her heart race, not only from the words, but from the vulnerability with which he had spoken them. Mr. Anderson, you know this is impossible, she finally said, unconsciously caressing her belly. You are the CEO. I am an administrative assistant. You live in the Upper East Side. I live in Brooklyn. You have a life I can't even imagine, and I'm a single mother, barely making ends meet. And so what? He asked, leaning slightly forward. None of that changes who you are as a person. None of that changes what I feel. It changes everything, Emily exclaimed, abruptly standing up from her chair. People will think I'm trying to take advantage, that I got pregnant on purpose to land a big fish. They will say you are having a fling with a vulnerable subordinate. And since when do you care what people think? Mr. Anderson challenged, standing up as well. Since always. I don't have the luxury of ignoring opinions like you do. My reputation is all I have. If it's destroyed, I lose my job, I lose the chance to finish college, I lose everything I've worked so hard for. The response hit Mr. Anderson like a slap in the face. He had grown up shielded by privileges that insulated him from the social consequences that Emily would face. For him, other people's opinions were inconvenient. For her, they could mean the complete destruction of her life. You're right, he admitted, running his hand over his face. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective. Forgive me for my naivety. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and possibilities that seemed impossible to realize. But that doesn't change how I feel, Mr. Anderson said softly. And I suspect it doesn't change how you feel either. Emily closed her eyes, fighting against tears that threatened to escape. What I feel doesn't matter, she whispered. I can't afford feelings when I have a child to raise on my own. Who said you'd be alone? The question made her open her eyes, finding his intense gaze fixed on her. Mr. Anderson, you don't even know my child. He isn't even born yet. But I know his mother, and if she is half the extraordinary woman I've seen over the past few months, he will be lucky to have you. Emily felt a tear escape, followed by another. Pregnancy made her more emotional, but it wasn't just hormones. It was months of loneliness, fear, and overwhelming responsibility finally finding a release. Hey, Mr. Anderson said gently, moving closer to her. Don't cry. Please. It's not easy, she murmured. None of this is easy. The pregnancy, the job, studying at night, worrying if I can give him a good life. Mr. Anderson hesitated for a moment, then gently placed his hands on her shoulders. You don't have to carry it all alone. I do. It's my responsibility. It can be shared, he said, his voice carrying an intensity that made her look directly at him. Let me help. How? In whatever way you allow me. As a friend, if that's all you can accept. As something more, if you can trust me. Emily gently pulled away, creating physical distance to think more clearly. Mr. Anderson, even if I wanted to, And I'm not saying I do. How would this work? Do you really imagine introducing a pregnant administrative assistant to your mother, to the company board, to the social elite of New York City? The question was brutally practical, and Mr. Anderson realized he didn't have a satisfactory answer. His mother, Virginia Anderson, was a conservative socialite who barely tolerated him working with common people. The idea of him romantically involved with a humble, pregnant employee would be unthinkable to her. "My family would have to accept it," he finally said, but without the conviction he wished he had. "No, they wouldn't, and you know that." Once again, her honesty completely disarmed him. Emily wasn't being cruel. She was being realistic in a way he rarely needed to be. "So what do we do?" he asked, frustration clear in his voice. "We continue as we are," she replied, although her voice trembled slightly. "You continue being a kind boss. I continue being a dedicated employee. The coffees, the morning conversations, we can keep that, but nothing more. And what if I can't settle for that?" Emily looked at him for long seconds, her green eyes revealing deep sadness. "Then we'll have to stop completely, because I can't afford to fall in love with someone who can't truly be mine." The involuntary confession, "fall in love," hung in the air between them. Both realized the slip, the admission that her feelings had already evolved beyond friendship. "Have you fallen in love?" Mr. Anderson asked softly. Emily didn't respond verbally, but the blush on her cheeks and the way she looked away was answer enough. "Emily, I have to go," she said quickly, heading for the door. "Thank you for the honesty, but we need to be practical." "Wait," Mr. Anderson called, but she had already left, leaving only the subtle aroma of jasmine and the echo of a conversation that had changed everything between them. Mr. Anderson stood in the middle of the office, watching the coffee cup that was slowly cooling on the table. For the first time in months, the coffee didn't taste the same. It was bitter, laden with the reality that sometimes love isn't enough to overcome the barriers that life builds between people. The next morning, for the first time since starting the ritual, there was no coffee waiting for Mr. Anderson. The table was empty, cold, without the familiar aroma that had become indispensable to his mornings. Emily had made a painful decision, but one she believed was the only sensible option. If she couldn't have Mr. Anderson in the way they both wanted, it was better to cut the bond completely before they hurt each other even more. But on the 15th floor, mechanically working on endless spreadsheets, she silently cried for a possibility she had to abandon before even having the chance to explore it. 3 days passed without morning coffee, and Mr. Anderson discovered it was possible to physically feel the absence of something that had become essential to his routine. It wasn't just the drink, it was the entire ritual of care it represented. The silent connection they had developed, the promise of a few minutes of humanity amidst corporate coldness. Ms. Helen Carter watched Mr. Anderson's increasingly somber mood with growing concern. He arrived at the office already irritated, kept meetings shorter and more formal than usual, and spent long hours staring out the window at the city that stretched infinitely below. "Mr. Anderson, you need to talk to someone about what's going on," Ms. Helen Carter said on Thursday morning, entering the office with a cup of coffee she had prepared in the executive kitchen. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, accepting the coffee, but immediately noticing it didn't have the same flavor, the same perfect temperature, the same care in preparation. "I'm talking about the employee from finance, who has disappeared from your morning routine. I'm talking about the fact that you spent 40 minutes yesterday looking at the security cameras on the 15th floor. Mr. Anderson stiffened, realizing that he had been. Mr. Anderson was more obvious in his concerns than he had imagined. "It's just professional interest. Mr. Anderson, respect me. I've worked with you for years. I know your expressions, your habits. This isn't professional interest, it's something personal that is affecting your work." He sighed deeply, finally recognizing that he wouldn't be able to hide the feelings consuming him indefinitely. "You were right," he admitted, sitting heavily in the chair. "I've developed feelings for her, feelings that go far beyond gratitude for some morning coffees." Ms. Helen Carter sat in the visitor's chair, assuming the maternal posture she reserved for the most delicate moments. "And her? She feels something too, but she's too smart to get carried away. She knows exactly what the consequences of any involvement between us would be." "And what are those consequences, in your opinion?" Mr. Anderson looked at her in surprise, expecting a reprimand, not an analytical question. "Helen, you yourself said it would be problematic." "I did, and I still think so. But maybe it's time for you to think concretely about what you really want and what you're willing to sacrifice to achieve it." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Martin, Mr. Anderson's best friend since college and the current legal director of Tech Corp Innovations. Mr. Martin was 37 years old, with a solid career, built through hard work and the brutal frankness of someone who had known Mr. Anderson since before the family inheritance. "Good morning, Helen. Mr. Anderson, I need to talk to you about some contracts," Mr. Martin said, but stopped upon noticing his friend's grim expression. "You look terrible. What happened?" Ms. Helen Carter discreetly stood up. "I'll leave you two to talk. Mr. Anderson, think about what we discussed." After she left, Mr. Martin helped himself to coffee from the thermos they always kept in the office and settled into the visitor's chair. "So, what corporate tragedy is keeping you up at night?" "It's not corporate, it's personal." Mr. Martin raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Mr. Anderson rarely discussed personal matters, even with his best friend. "Woman?" "Yes." "Married?" "Single. Pregnant." Mr. Martin almost spit out his coffee. "Pregnant? Mr. Anderson, for God's sake, tell me you didn't get involved with a committed woman who—" "She's single," Mr. Anderson interrupted. "The father of the child didn't want to take responsibility, and I haven't gotten involved with her yet." "Yet? What does that mean?" Mr. Anderson told Mr. Martin everything, the morning coffees, the conversations, the connection that had developed, the feelings they both admitted at the summer festival, and her decision to cut off any contact that could complicate their lives. "And she works here?" Mr. Martin asked when Mr. Anderson finished. "Finance department, administrative assistant." Mr. Martin fell silent for long minutes, processing the information with the analytical mind of a lawyer that he always applied to complex situations. "Mr. Anderson, do you understand the legal implications of this?" "Legal?" "Relationship between supervisor and subordinate, difference in hierarchical power, possible harassment even if unintentional. If this goes wrong, it could turn into a labor lawsuit that would destroy your reputation and the company's. She's not that kind of person. Everyone becomes that kind of person when they feel hurt, rejected, or humiliated," Mr. Martin cut in. "And a pregnant woman, alone, financially dependent on her job? Mr. Anderson, this is a ticking time bomb. So what are you suggesting? That you forget this story and go back to dating women from your social class who don't depend on you financially and who don't have complications like being pregnant by another man." The response irritated Mr. Anderson more than he expected. "Thank you for the sensible and completely heartless advice," he said dryly. "Heart is a luxury that CEOs of billion-dollar companies can't afford," Mr. Martin replied. "You have responsibilities that go far beyond your personal feelings." That afternoon, Mr. Anderson made an impulsive decision that surprised even himself. At 5:30 in the evening, when he knew the regular workday was ending, he went down to the 15th floor. The finance department still had a few people working, but Emily wasn't at her desk. Mr. Anderson discreetly asked Miss Mary where she was. "She left early today," Miss Mary replied with a slightly worried expression. "She wasn't feeling very well. Back pain, swollen feet. You know how it is at the end of pregnancy." Mr. Anderson felt a genuine pang of concern. Emily had been working until 2 weeks before her due date, pushing a body that clearly needed rest. Is she okay financially?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Miss Mary looked at him with surprise and a hint of suspicion. "Why the interest, Mr. Anderson?" "It's just concern for the well-being of a dedicated employee," Mr. Anderson replied, realizing he sounded unconvincing. "She's strong, works hard, but honestly, I think she's pushing herself too much. She stays late studying, works full-time here, and still has to prepare for the baby alone. It's a lot for anyone." Mr. Anderson thanked her for the information and returned to the 30th floor with a heavy heart. The image of Emily exhausting herself physically and emotionally, while he respected the distance she had requested, troubled him deeply. On Friday, he made another impulsive decision. He called the Human Resources Department and requested information about maternity leave for pregnant employees. "Mr. Anderson, is there a specific case that is concerning you?" asked Ms. Sandra, the HR director. "An employee from Finance, Emily Johnson. She's at the end of her pregnancy and seems to be pushing herself beyond what's necessary. I can check her history and assess whether it would be advisable to suggest that she start her maternity leave earlier." "Please do that. And, Sandra, can this stay between us? I don't want it to seem like harassment or favoritism." "Of course, sir." On Saturday morning, Mr. Anderson was in his penthouse on the Upper East Side, having coffee alone and looking at the panoramic view of the city, when he received an unexpected call. "Mr. Anderson, it's Ms. Mary. From the finance department. I got your number from Helen. Sorry to bother you on the weekend, but it's about Emily." Mr. Anderson's heart raced. What happened? "She felt unwell last night. Low blood pressure, extreme fatigue. She's in the hospital for observation. She has no family. She has no one. I thought you would like to know, since you always ask about her." Mr. Anderson didn't ask how Ms. Mary knew about his interest in Emily. It didn't matter anymore. "Which hospital?" "St. Joseph's in the Upper West Side. But Mr. Anderson, she might not want visitors. She's very sensitive about anything that might seem like pity or a favor." "I understand. Thank you for calling." Mr. Anderson hung up the phone and stood still for a full 5 minutes, looking at the city stretching beyond his windows. He could respect the boundaries Emily had set and keep his distance. He could listen to the wise advice of Ms. Helen and Mr. Martin. He could protect his reputation and the stability of the company. Or he could do what his heart screamed was right, be there for the woman he had fallen in love with, even if she rejected him, even if it complicated their lives, even if it brought consequences he couldn't yet foresee. Mr. Anderson grabbed his car keys. He had decided that some risks were worth taking, and Emily was definitely one of them. The consequences, social, professional, familial, would have to be faced as they came. But he wouldn't be able to live with himself, knowing she was alone and vulnerable in a hospital, and he hadn't done anything. As he drove through the streets of New York City toward the hospital, Mr. Anderson finally admitted to himself a truth he had been avoiding for months. He was completely in love with Emily Johnson, and that passion had already surpassed the point where sensibility or social convenience mattered more than his feelings. Now he just needed to find out if she would give him a chance to prove that sometimes true love can be strong enough to overcome any obstacle the world puts in its way. St. Joseph's Hospital in the Upper West Side was one of the most prestigious in New York City, with its modern facades and well-kept gardens contrasting with the anxiety Mr. Anderson felt as he searched for a parking spot. It was 11 o'clock on a sunny Saturday, but for him it could have been midnight, given how dark his thoughts were about Emily's condition. At the reception, a middle-aged nurse with a professional smile informed him that Emily was in room 304, maternity ward, but that visits were restricted to family only. "I'm a very close friend," Mr. Anderson said, hesitating on how to define his relationship with her. "She has no family in New York City. I'm worried." The nurse observed him for a few seconds, clearly noting his expensive clothing, the luxury watch, the posture of someone used to getting what they wanted. Name? Mr. Anderson. The surname had the desired effect. The Anderson family had been one of the largest benefactors of the hospital for decades. "Third floor, Mr. Anderson, but please don't take too long. The patient needs rest." Mr. Anderson took the elevator up with his heart pounding harder. During the drive to the hospital, he had mentally rehearsed what he would say to Emily, how he would explain his presence there, how he would convince her that he was genuinely concerned and not trying to take advantage of a moment of vulnerability. The maternity ward smelled of disinfectant and baby powder, a mix that always left him slightly uncomfortable. Low voices echoed from the rooms, interspersed with the cries of babies and murmurs from families visiting new mothers. He stopped in front of room 304, took a deep breath, and knocked softly. "Come in," said a voice he recognized immediately, though it sounded weaker than usual. Emily was lying in the hospital bed, wearing a light blue hospital gown that made her look even younger and more fragile. Her legs were elevated, connected to monitors showing her blood pressure and the baby's heart rate. When she saw Mr. Anderson standing in the doorway, her eyes widened in surprise and something he couldn't identify. Relief, concern, embarrassment. "Mr. Anderson, why are you here?" He entered the room hesitantly, closing the door behind him to give privacy to the conversation he knew was necessary. "Miss Mary called me. She said you had taken ill, that you were alone." He stopped a few steps from the bed, respecting the distance she might want to maintain. "I was worried." Emily tried to sit up better in the bed, but the movement caused a grimace of discomfort. Immediately, Mr. Anderson moved closer. "Don't move. Stay still." His voice carried a gentle authority that made her obey automatically. "How are you? What did the doctors say?" "Low blood pressure, a lot of fatigue, a bit of dehydration," she replied, avoiding direct eye contact. "Nothing serious. I'll be discharged this afternoon." "How many months pregnant are you now?" 8.5. 3 weeks until the due date." Mr. Anderson sat in the visitor's chair next to the bed, watching the monitors that displayed her and the baby's vital signs. "You've been working too hard," Ms. Mary told me. "Full-time here, college at night, still handling all the preparations for the baby alone." "It's my responsibility," Emily replied, with a stubbornness he already knew well. "Responsibility doesn't mean you have to work yourself to the bone until 2 weeks before the due date." "And what's the alternative? Stop working, stop studying. I don't have the luxury of resting when I want, Mr. Anderson. I have bills to pay and a future to build." The frustration in her voice was palpable, but Mr. Anderson also sensed beneath it a deep exhaustion that went beyond the physical. "Emily, look at me," he gently urged. She hesitated, then slowly turned her face to meet his gaze. Her green eyes were slightly puffy, with dark circles revealing sleepless nights and constant worry. "You don't have to carry everything alone," he said, repeating the words he had said weeks ago in the office. "I do. It's my life, my choice, my responsibility." "And what if it weren't? What if someone genuinely wanted to help?" Emily sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. "Mr. Anderson, we've talked about this. Your help comes with complications that I can't afford to face." "What complications, specifically?" "You want specifics?" Emily opened her eyes, and for the first time since he entered the room, there was anger there. "Fine. If you help me financially, people will think I'm your mistress. If you give me special attention at work, they'll think I'm sleeping with you to get promotions. If we're seen together anywhere, I'll become the gold digger who got pregnant to snag a rich guy." Each word was like a stab, not because it was false, but because it was absolutely true. Mr. Anderson had grown up shielded by privileges that insulated him from these social realities. "And then, there's your family," Emily continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Do you really think your mother, who frequents the equestrian club and dines at Fasano, will accept a daughter-in-law from Brooklyn, a single mother who works as an administrative assistant?" "My mother would have to accept it," Mr. Anderson said, though his voice carried less conviction than he would have liked. "No, she wouldn't, and you know that. Just as you know that the company's board would be concerned about a CEO who gets involved with subordinate employees. Just as you know that your reputation, which you've spent years building, would be tarnished." Mr. Anderson fell silent, processing her words. It was all true, but there was something she wasn't considering. "What if I say I don't care about any of that?" he finally asked. "I would say you're being naive. Or I would say I've found something worth more than reputation, other people's opinions, and social approval." Emily looked at him in surprise, sensing something new in his tone, a determination she hadn't heard before. "Mr. Anderson, Emily, in the past few weeks, since we stopped talking, I've realized something. I can have a perfect life. On paper, money, position, social status, but if it's a life without you, it will be an empty life." He leaned forward in the chair, getting closer to her. "I've fallen in love with you, not for the idea of having a woman dependent on me, not for some savior complex, not out of rebellion against my social class. I've fallen in love with the woman who makes coffee thinking of me, who works 3 shifts to build a better future for her child, who has enough wisdom to teach me things I never learned at Harvard." Emily felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. "That doesn't change the practical difficulties. It changes everything, because now I have something worth fighting for, someone worth facing any consequence." The heart monitor began to speed up, reflecting Emily's emotional agitation. Mr. Anderson immediately became concerned. "Hey, calm down. Don't get nervous. It's bad for you and for the baby. It's just, I also fell in love with you," she confessed through tears, "and that scares me more than anything else in my life." The confession hung between them like a bridge finally built over the chasm they had tried to maintain between their different worlds. "Why does it scare you?" Mr. Anderson asked gently. "Because when you realize how complicated our life is, when you face the real judgment of people, when your family puts pressure on you, you will give up. And I will be even more hurt than before." Mr. Anderson stood up from the chair and, ignoring all hospital protocols, carefully sat on the edge of her bed. "Emily, look into my eyes." She obeyed, finding those blue eyes that had become so familiar and important to her. "I won't give up, no matter what my family says, no matter what society thinks, no matter what professional consequences I have to face. You and we will find a way to make this work." "How can you be so sure?" "Because, for the first time in my life, I've found something that is truly mine. Not inherited, not earned by surname or privilege, mine by choice, mine by emotional merit." Emily was now openly crying, but these were tears that mixed fear with hope. "And the baby? Can you really accept raising another man's child?" "That baby is not another man's child," Mr. Anderson said, with a conviction that surprised her. "That baby is yours, and if you let me be part of his life, he will be mine too, not biologically, but in all the ways that truly matter." The answer broke down Emily's last defenses. Years of loneliness, months of fear about the future, weeks of struggling against feelings she thought were impossible, all crumbled in the face of the absolute sincerity she saw in Mr. Anderson's eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted, carefully taking her hands, "but I would rather be scared by your side than safe. Away from you." In that moment, with the smell of hospital disinfectant mixed with her subtle jasmine perfume, with the heart monitors marking the rhythm of the two hearts that had finally admitted their feelings, Mr. Anderson and Emily crossed the line they had been trying to avoid for months. There was no turning back. They would face together the consequences of a choice that the world would consider impossible, but which had become the only real possibility for happiness for them. The baby stirred in Emily's belly at that exact moment, as if approving the decision that would forever change the lives of all three. Emily's return to work on Monday was marked by a palpable tension she felt from the moment she set foot in the TechCorp building. The 24 hours she spent in the hospital had fundamentally changed her relationship with Mr. Anderson, and now she needed to navigate the complexities of maintaining her professional life while processing the promises he had made. Mr. Anderson had insisted on taking her home from the hospital on Saturday afternoon, personally driving his Porsche to Brooklyn, a trip that took almost 2 hours. Emily observed the New York City traffic in respectful silence, discreetly noting the glaring difference between the worlds they inhabited. Her apartment was even smaller than Mr. Anderson had imagined, but it was impeccably clean and organized. She had transformed every inch of the tiny space into functionality. The room that would serve as a nursery was carefully prepared with basic yet essential items, purchased with significant financial sacrifice. "It's humble," she had said, clearly embarrassed as she saw him observing the environment. "It's a home," Mr. Anderson corrected, noticing the details that revealed who she truly was. College textbooks stacked on a small desk, photos of Grandma Betty in simple frames, a calendar where she meticulously noted medical appointments and university exams. Now, on a Monday morning, Emily was heading back up to the 30th floor for the first time since the conversation that had interrupted their morning visits. She carried a thermal cup with coffee, made with the same care as always. But this time she also carried the anxiety of not knowing what it would be like to see Mr. Anderson after everything they had confessed to each other. The office was bright when she arrived. Mr. Anderson was waiting for her, dressed in a navy suit that accentuated his eyes, but his expression was tenser than she remembered. "Good morning," she said softly, entering the space that now felt charged with different meanings. "Good morning, Emily. How are you feeling? Did you sleep well?" "Better, thank you. And you seem worried." Mr. Anderson sighed, gesturing for her to sit down. At 36 weeks pregnant, standing for too long was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you about some complications that have arisen." Emily's heart raced. "What kind of complications?" "On Sunday night, my mother called me. Someone informed her about my visit to the hospital on Saturday." Emily paled. "How did she find out?" "New York City is smaller than it seems when you have a well-known last name. Nurses, security, receptionists. Someone mentioned it to someone who mentioned it to another person, until the information reached the social circles my mother frequents." "What did she say?" Mr. Anderson ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Emily had learned to recognize as a sign of great nervousness. "That she is deeply concerned about my reputation, and that this kind of inappropriate behavior could destroy decades of family work to build our social standing." Each word was like a stab to Emily's heart. She had anticipated exactly this reaction, but hearing the confirmation still hurt deeply. "And what did you respond?" "That my personal life is none of her business, And if she wants to continue having a relationship with me, she will have to respect my choices." The firmness in his voice surprised Emily, but it also worried her. She knew from her own experience how painful it was to fall out with family, especially when one felt alone in the world. "Mr. Anderson, you can't fight with your mother because of me." "It's not because of you," he interrupted. "It's for me, for us. Emily, if I give in to her pressures now, what will be the next thing she tries to control in my life?" The conversation was interrupted by the abrupt entrance of Miss Helen Carter, who knocked on the door but entered without waiting for a response. Her expression was more serious than Emily had ever seen. "Mr. Anderson, we need to talk. Now." "Helen, can you wait a few minutes? I'm in a meeting." "I can't wait. And she needs to hear this too." Helen looked directly at Emily with an expression that mixed pity with determination. "Emily, are you aware of your current employment situation?" "What do you mean?" Emily asked, suddenly alarmed. "The board of directors met extraordinarily on Sunday night. They are concerned about possible irregularities in the workplace." Mr. Anderson stood up from his chair, his voice carrying an authority he rarely used with Helen. "What kind of irregularities?" "Inappropriate relationship between supervisor and subordinate, possible favoritism, risk of a harassment lawsuit, even if unintentional." "This is ridiculous." "It's the reality, Mr. Anderson." Helen turned to Emily, her voice softening slightly. "Emily, they are considering transferring you to another department or other measures." "What other measures?" Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. "Termination for cause, citing inappropriate behavior in the workplace." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily felt as if the ground was disappearing beneath her feet. Losing her job while 8.5 months pregnant, with all the bills to pay and college to finish, would be the end of everything she had built. "They can't do this," Mr. Anderson said, his voice filled with anger. "They can and will if—" "You don't make a decision," Helen replied. "Mr. Anderson, you have to choose. Either maintain complete professional distance from Emily, or she leaves the company." "And what if I leave the company?" Mr. Anderson asked suddenly. Both women looked at him in shock. "What?" Helen exclaimed. "If I resign as CEO, that would eliminate the hierarchical conflict, wouldn't it?" "Mr. Anderson, you can't be serious," Helen said, her voice laden with disbelief. "Why not?" "I have other career options. I can start my own consulting firm using my experience and contacts independently." Emily stood up from her chair with difficulty, leaning on the table. "Stop! Both of you, stop!" Her voice was firm, but Mr. Anderson could see tears forming in her eyes. "You are talking about his life as if it were a game. Mr. Anderson, you are not going to abandon everything you have built because of me." "It's not because of you." "It is. And even if you did that, the problems wouldn't end. Your mother would still hate me. Society would still judge me. And you would still be the rich heir who gave it all up for a pregnant employee. People are not going to forget or forgive that." Emily walked slowly to the window, looking out at the city that stretched infinitely beyond the glass. "I grew up knowing my place in the world. I tried for a few days to believe it could be different. But both of you, they are showing me the reality I already knew." "Emily, don't say that," Mr. Anderson began, approaching her. "It's the truth. Look at us, Mr. Anderson. Look objectively at this situation. You are going to destroy your career, alienate your family, create a scandal that will affect hundreds of employees. Why? For a few months of morning conversations." "For love," he simply replied. The word hung in the air like a final confession that changed everything and nothing at the same time. "Love doesn't pay the bills," Emily said, her voice slightly breaking. Love doesn't change class differences. Love doesn't make babies born into traditional families. Ms. Helen Carter, who had been silently observing the conversation, finally spoke up. "Emily is right, Mr. Anderson, as painful as it is to admit." But it was at that moment that the situation took an unexpected turn. The office door opened again, and an elegant woman in her early 50s entered without ceremony. Emily recognized her immediately from social media photos. Ms. Virginia Anderson, Mr. Anderson's mother. Virginia was exactly as Emily had imagined, tall, slim, with perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive yet understated clothing, a posture that exuded years of refined education and privileged social standing. Her blue eyes, similar to Mr. Anderson's, scanned the room until they landed on Emily with a cold, evaluating expression. "So this is her," said Virginia, her voice laced with barely concealed disdain. "Mother, you can't just walk in here like this," Mr. Anderson began, clearly irritated. "I can, and I have. I need to speak with this young woman in person." Virginia approached Emily, who instinctively placed a hand on her protruding belly, as if to protect the baby from the hostility emanating from the older woman. "Emily Johnson, isn't it? Administrative assistant, single, pregnant, living in Brooklyn, night student of business at a private college, orphan, raised by her grandmother." Each word was pronounced as if it were an accusation. Emily straightened up, gathering all the dignity she possessed. "Yes, ma'am, all of that. And do you really believe you have anything to offer my son?" The question was cruel and direct. Mr. Anderson stepped forward to intervene, but Emily stopped him with a gesture. "I believe I have genuine love, respect, and admiration for him. If that is enough, I don't know. But I know I never sought him out, never asked him for anything, and never tried to take advantage of his position." Virginia laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "How convenient. The virtuous poor girl who never asks for anything, yet somehow always manages to attract the attention of the most powerful man she knows." "Mother, enough!" exclaimed Mr. Anderson, his voice heavy with anger. "No, let her speak," Emily said calmly. "Ms. Anderson, did you come here to offer me money to disappear from your son's life?" The direct question surprised Virginia, who clearly did not expect Emily to be so upfront. "If it were necessary." "It's not. I have already made my decision." Emily turned to Mr. Anderson, her green eyes meeting his blue ones for the last time with the intimacy they had shared over the past months. "Mr. Anderson, what we had was real and beautiful, but it belongs to a world that doesn't exist in reality. You deserve a life without complications, and I deserve a life where I don't have to constantly prove that I'm not a gold digger." "Emily, no. I will request a transfer to another department or accept termination if necessary. Let's end this before it causes more pain for everyone involved." And with those words, Emily headed for the door, passing by Virginia without a glance, leaving behind the man she loved and the possibility of a future that had proven impossible to reach. But while waiting for the elevator, with tears silently streaming down her face, Emily did not know that Mr. Anderson was making the most important decision of his life, a decision that would prove that sometimes true love is strong enough to change not only people, but the very world around them. 3 weeks passed since the confrontation in Mr. Anderson's office. Emily had requested an immediate transfer to the accounting department on the 12th floor, avoiding any possibility of casual encounters. Her mornings now began with solitary coffee at home, without the affectionate ritual that had defined her last months. The baby was due any moment. At 39 weeks pregnant, Emily moved slowly through the company corridors, her last days before maternity leave. She had chosen to work until the end to ensure she received all possible benefits, even if it meant facing curious glances and whispered comments in the hallways. Mr. Anderson, for his part, had become a shadow of himself. Ms. Helen Carter watched with growing concern as he performed his tasks mechanically, attended meetings without his usual enthusiasm, and spent long periods staring out the window at the city that stretched beyond the glass. "You're going to make yourself sick if you keep this up," Ms. Carter said on a Thursday morning, finding Mr. Anderson in his office even before the usual arrival time. "I'm fine," he replied automatically, though he clearly was not. "Mr. Anderson, you've lost almost 10 pounds in the last 3 weeks. You barely eat, hardly sleep, and are functioning on autopilot. That's not healthy." Mr. Anderson finally turned from the window to face her. "Ms. Carter, have you ever been in love?" The question caught her off guard. In 28 years of professional interaction, Mr. Anderson had never asked such personal questions. Yes, once, a long time ago. "And what happened?" "I chose security over love. I married a sensible man, had a comfortable and predictable life, and I regret that choice every day for 30 years. The brutal honesty of Miss Carter surprised Mr. Anderson. He had never imagined that his assistant, always so composed and professional, carried such deep regret. "Why didn't you tell me this when I asked for advice about Emily?" "Because I thought you would make the sensible decision on your own. I didn't imagine you would be brave enough to risk everything." "For love." "And now?" Miss Helen Carter sat in the visitor's chair, watching the man she had seen grow from an insecure young heir to a competent CEO. "Now I think you should have been brave before it was too late." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the intercom. The receptionist's voice came through urgently. "Mr. Anderson, there's a call from St. Joseph's Hospital. They say it's urgent." Ricardo's heart stopped for a second. Only one person he knew could be at St. Joseph's Hospital. "Transfer it," he said, his voice betraying the anxiety he felt. "Mr. Anderson, this is Dr. Sarah Williams from the maternity ward at St. Joseph's. Ms. Emily Johnson is in labor and requested that we contact you." Ricardo almost dropped the phone. She asked for me to be called." "Yes, sir. She's alone and said you are, well, the most important person in her life besides the baby who is being born. I'm on my way there, now." Ricardo hung up the phone and headed for the door, but Ms. Helen Carter intercepted him. "Ricardo, think carefully about what you're doing. If you show up at the hospital, it will be impossible to keep this a secret. The media, your mother, the board. Helen, the woman I love, is giving birth alone. Do you really think I'm going to stay here pretending this isn't happening? What if she doesn't want you there? What if it was just a moment of weakness?" Ricardo paused, considering the possibility. Then he shook his head. "There's only one way to find out." The hospital was busy that Friday morning when Ricardo arrived, driving his Porsche as if he were in a race against time. At the reception, he was directed to the 5th floor obstetrics center, where he found a medical team clearly waiting for him. "Mr. Anderson, I'm Dr. Sarah. Emily is in room 3, inactive, labor for 4 hours. "How is she?" "Well, but scared. It's her first child, she's alone, and specifically requested your presence." As they walked down the corridor toward the room, the doctor explained the protocol. "She's in the transition phase, the most intense part of labor. She may be emotional, confused, scared. Your presence can help a lot, but you need to be prepared to see her in a vulnerable situation." Ricardo stopped in front of room 3, hearing for the first time the sounds from inside. Heavy breathing, murmurs from nurses, and occasionally a groan of pain that made his heart tighten. "Can I go in?" "Of course. She's been waiting for you." The delivery room was all white, illuminated by bright lights that couldn't hide the intimacy of the moment. Emily was lying on the bed, her face glistening with sweat, hair sticking to her forehead, wearing a blue hospital gown. When she saw him enter, her eyes filled with tears, not from physical pain, but from emotional relief. "Ricardo, You came. He approached the bed, instinctively taking her outstretched hand. Of course I came. How are you? Scared, she admitted, her voice broken by the heavy breathing between contractions. Very scared. I'm here now. You're not alone. The next contraction came with full force, and Emily squeezed Ricardo's hand with a strength he didn't know she possessed. He stayed there, whispering words of encouragement, wiping the sweat from her forehead with a towel a nurse had offered him. "Why did you call me?" he asked during a pause between contractions. "Because when I imagined my baby being born, the only person I wanted here was you," she replied honestly. "I know we've complicated everything. I know our situation is impossible, but you are the person I love, and I wanted you to meet our baby the moment he arrived in the world." "Our baby," Ricardo repeated, catching the use of the possessive. Emily nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. If you still want to, after everything that has happened." Ricardo's response came in the form of a gentle kiss on her forehead, followed by words she had given up hoping to hear. "I want to. I want it more than anything else in the world." The next 2 hours were an emotional roller coaster. Ricardo stayed by Emily's side during each contraction, holding her hand, encouraging her when she said she couldn't go on, wiping her tears when the pain became unbearable. At 3:47 p.m. on Friday, September 15th, baby Gabriel Johnson was born. 3 kilograms and 200 grams of perfect baby, with dark hair like his mother's and an impressive lung capacity that he immediately demonstrated through a vigorous cry. "It's a healthy boy," announced Dr. Sarah, placing the baby in Emily's arms. "Congratulations, Mom." Emily looked at her son with a mix of exhaustion and absolute love. Gabriel was perfect. Tiny fingers, a serious expression that contrasted with the indignant cries and a way of looking around as if he were already curious about the world he had just entered. "Hi, Gabriel," she whispered. "I'm your mom, and this is Ricardo. He wants to be your dad, if you let him." Ricardo, who had remained strong throughout the labor, finally became emotional upon seeing the baby in Emily's arms. Without even realizing it, tears streamed down his face. Can I hold him?" he asked, hesitantly. Emily smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her in weeks. "Of course, he's your baby, too." When Ricardo held Gabriel in his arms for the first time, something fundamentally changed within him. The baby stopped crying, as if recognizing the safety of that embrace, and opened his little eyes that, to everyone's surprise, were blue, like Ricardo's. "Hello, Gabriel," Ricardo murmured, his voice choked with emotion. I will be your father, and I will love you, to love and protect for the rest of my life." Emily watched the scene with her heart overflowing, seeing Mr. Anderson holding baby Gabriel as if he were the most precious thing in the world, confirmed everything she had felt about him during their months together. "Mr. Anderson," she said softly, "I love you, and I'm so sorry for everything that happened, for giving up so easily." "No," he interrupted, still holding baby Gabriel. "I'm the one who is sorry for not fighting harder for us, for letting my family and social pressures interfere with what we knew was true. And now? What do we do now?" Mr. Anderson looked at baby Gabriel, who had fallen asleep in his arms, then at Emily, exhausted but radiant in her hospital bed. "Now we build our family. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It doesn't matter what obstacles we have to face. The 3 of us together can overcome anything." 3 hours later, Ms. Helen Carter arrived at the hospital carrying a bag with clothes and personal items for Emily, followed by Ms. Mary and 2 other colleagues from the finance department. To everyone's surprise, she also brought flowers, an elegant yet warm arrangement. "How is our new mommy?" asked Miss Helen, entering the private room where Emily rested with baby Gabriel in the crib beside the bed, and Mr. Anderson sitting in the German leather armchair, watching both as if they were a miracle. "Tired but happy," Emily replied. "Miss Helen, thank you for coming." "I couldn't miss the chance to meet the baby who will change our family," said Miss Helen with a smile that surprised both Mr. Anderson and Emily. "Our family?" Mr. Anderson asked. "Mr. Anderson, I've worked with you for 28 years. I've seen you grow from an insecure boy to a competent man. I've never seen you as happy as you were this afternoon when you called from the hospital, crying with joy to tell me you became a father." Miss Helen approached the crib, watching baby Gabriel sleep peacefully. "Besides, any woman who can make you act like a human being instead of a robotic executive has my unconditional approval." During the 3 days that Emily stayed in the hospital, Mr. Anderson practically lived there. He slept in the armchair in the room, helped with diaper changes, woke up for midnight feedings, and showed a paternal dedication that impressed the entire medical staff. "I've never seen a first-time dad so natural," commented a nurse to Ms. Helen during a visit. "It's because he chose to be a father," replied Ms. Helen. "It's different from someone who just becomes a father by accident." On Sunday, when Emily was discharged, Mr. Anderson made a decision that sealed their future. "Emily, you and baby Gabriel are going to live with me." "Mr. Anderson, this isn't a request, it's not a suggestion, it's a necessity. You both are my family now, and families stay together." "And your mother and the board?" "I've already talked to everyone I needed to talk to. My mother will have to accept it, or she will lose her son and grandson. The board will have to get used to a CEO who has a personal life, and the rest of the world will have to accept that sometimes true love doesn't follow social rules." As he carefully placed baby Gabriel in the luxury car seat, a top-of-the-line model he had bought and professionally installed the day before, Emily watched the man who had completely changed her life. "Are you sure about this? About all the sacrifices you will have to make?" Mr. Anderson closed the car door, approached her, and kissed her gently. The first true kiss they had shared, sealing months of tension and weeks of longing. "Emily, look at him," he said, pointing to baby Gabriel, who slept peacefully in the back seat. "Look at us. This isn't a sacrifice. This is the life I've always wanted, but never knew was possible." During the drive from the Upper West Side to the Upper East Side, crossing New York City toward Mr. Anderson's apartment that would now be their home, Emily reflected on the extraordinary journey that had taken her from those quiet mornings leaving coffee on the table to this moment, sitting next to the man she loved, with their son sleeping in the back seat, heading toward a life that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Baby Gabriel will grow up knowing he was loved before he was even born," she said, watching the baby through the rearview mirror. "And he will grow up seeing an example of true love between his parents," replied Mr. Anderson, intertwining his fingers with her free hand. 15 months after the first coffee left quietly on the mahogany table, they had built more than a relationship. They had created a family based on conscious choice, mutual respect, and the courage to fight against all social expectations to protect what truly mattered. As the silver luxury car navigated the streets of New York City toward the future they had chosen to build together, baby Gabriel slept peacefully in the back seat, unaware that his very existence had been the catalyst for a love story that proved to be stronger than class differences, family pressures, and all the barriers the world had tried to place between his parents. The morning coffee had only been the beginning. The true romance blossomed when 3 hearts became a family, not by chance or convenience, but by a conscious choice that genuine love is worth any struggle necessary to protect it.